It's 1801, and a woman whose name seems to have been lost to history is working in a floating brothel in Guangdong province, China. Many of her clients are pirates, and one in particular, Cheng Yi, decides he wants to marry her. And so she becomes known to history as Cheng Yi Sao, which basically means Cheng Yi's wife. But history doesn't just remember her as a woman who married a pirate. Rather, she is remembered as one of history's most successful pirates herself. Welcome to Remember, a podcast about history, mystery, and did you know that a junk is a type of boat?
Yes.
I learned that while researching this episode.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like a Chinese junk? Yeah, it's a boat.
I was like, wow, it is not nice for all these historians to refer to these pirate ships as junk. And then I Googled it. So they are ships with fully battened sails. And then I was like, well, what does that mean? I spent way too long going down a rabbit hole of what battened sails are, but they look, if you're not sure, they kind of look like dragon wings to me. You know, the way like a dragon's bones go through like the wing. It feels kind of like that to me. But you know what's not an old, discarded item considered useless or of little value? My co-host, Matthew Jude.
I have had numerous women in my life disagree, but thank you.
And my name is Paula, and yes, that was the dictionary definition of the word junk. And that's not you, Matthew. You're not junk.
Yes, I'm rubbish, and that's what they call it here. Sorry, I'm not husband material. So that's the way she worded it.
Oh, God. Anyhow, today we are talking about the notorious Chinese female pirate, Cheng Yi Sao. Her name is spelled a bunch of different ways, and like I said in the intro, it isn't actually really her name. It's basically like saying Mrs. Cheng. I did see in one place that she was also called Shishanggu, but I only saw that in one place, so I don't know. Basically, what I'm trying to say is we don't know her real name, and we don't know a lot about her. There are conflicting stories about her and some details that are likely wildly sensationalized. But I have done my best to cross-reference multiple sources and try to put together what I think is the most accurate story. Which brings me to the point that Matthew and I aren't historians. We are two people interested in history and willing to do the Googling and present the stories we find interesting to you. We do our best to have sound research practices and separate truth from legend wherever we can. Okay. So let's travel back now to 1790s China.
I can see it now. Very closed off. You can get in and out from one place, Canton. I can feel that. Mm-hmm. What's beyond there? Who knows? The Manchu are in charge, I think, if my Chinese history is doing me any justice.
At this point, it's the Qing dynasty. Does that help?
Yeah, that's them. The foreigners, mandarins.
It is interesting that you bring up this like closed feeling, this like not wanting to really interact with the less civilized Western world.
Everyone always thinks that Japan has been the closed country. They had one port, until the Opium Wars, China only had one port open to foreigners, and that was Canton.
Yeah, and that's exactly the area we're going to be talking about right now. Generally speaking, up to this point in history, China was much more focused on growth and expansion of power through their land, not through the sea. And I have written here, it did have one very large port in Canton.
Guangzhou, I think, the Chinese, maybe. That is that's the very extremities of my memory.
What I know is it's in Guangdong province.
Yeah.
But overall, China had not overly developed its navy or invested in expansive ocean trade routes. Ships tended to be small and mainly meant to stick around the coastlines or travel up rivers, which opened up the doors for smuggling and piracy.
Yeah, and really came to bite them in the arse when it came to the Opium Wars, because that was against Britain, who famously love boats. We're going to be doing an episode in the future, Paula, all about a Scottish guy who stole the tea from China. I've done the research for it. It's exciting.
That'll be really interesting, especially to see if it ties in at all to anything we learned today.
Yeah, and it's roughly the same period of time. It's the 1850s that this happens.
Yeah, so it's just post this. So at this time, pirate groups themselves were small and disjointed. Maybe a junk or two and 30 or fewer people on the ship. Now, Vietnam had been hiring Chinese pirates as privateers to protect their coastline and to bring in iron for trading, which China did not allow to be exported. And it's interesting because Vietnam didn't allow rice to be exported. So there was a lot of illicit pirate back and forth of swapping iron and rice illegally. But this kind of became a safe haven, Vietnam, for these Chinese pirates. But that ended in 1802 as the leadership of Vietnam changed. That is beyond the scope of this episode, but things happened in Vietnam that ended this support of the Chinese pirates in 1802. And all those pirates were returning to the South China Seas and looking for a new way to operate and exist. At this point, though, they were more connected to other pirates now because their time as privateers for Vietnam meant that they had started to create a bit of a network amongst themselves. There was almost a jurisdictional no man's land around the border between northern Vietnam and western China, and especially the further away from the coast one went into the ocean. Who was in charge there? Who enforced the law?
The sea's in charge, Paula. The waves are the law.
That's right.
The wind is your judge.
Exactly.
The salt, your witness.
The kraken, your executioner.
The dolphins, the hangman of the sea.
That's what I've always called them, the dolphins, the hangmen of the sea. This made it easy to act outside that law and move back and forth from one area of jurisdiction to the other in order to escape consequences. Kind of like, like if you're in a video game and you just run out of the aggro reach of an enemy and they suddenly stop chasing you. And you take a health potion, craft some new ammo, and then go back. It's basically like that.
Look, no one on Earth likes consequences. Least of all pirates.
No one's looking forward to... No one engages in a behavior and it's like, man, I cannot wait for these consequences to come back and bite me in the butt. No one says that.
Oh, great. Oh, fantastic. I learned a lesson. Just what I wanted.
Cheng Yi, who was a pirate at this time, remember, saw an opportunity to organize all these disjointed pirate outfits into one big, powerful operation. And since it was common for these pirates to have their whole families with them on board...
Like the Starship Enterprise.
Exactly. These pirates were basically just the Starship Enterprise. I actually almost... I didn't end up putting it in here, but later I talk about the size of some of these boats and the number of people involved. And I literally almost looked up the number of people on board the Enterprise in Star Trek The Next Generation as a comparison point. And then I was like, I'm not going to do that. That's going to be meaningful to so few people. So Cheng Yi Sao is right there along with Cheng Yi, pirating along with him. And she's like, hey, I'm smart. I'm good at stuff. I can help you band together all these disjointed pirates. At this point, I want to back up a little. I just want to tell one of these stories that is not true, but gets told a lot about Cheng Yi Sao. So the story goes that Cheng Yi falls in love with her at the brothel, kidnaps her, takes her to the pirate ship, where she punches him in the face and says, "You're going to give me half your business." And he's like, okay. And that's how she became a strong female character. This is not likely very untrue. It makes no sense. But so this is the kind of thing that sometimes you see.
That's how Bezos' wife got rich and famous, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly the same thing. There's a lot of dime novel type things written about Cheng Yi Sao back in the day. And a lot of these things, were it's fun. Put out there as though they were proper history when they're just stories. So anyway, back to what I believe is actual fact. So Cheng Yi is heading things up, and together they form a confederation of pirates. Everyone who joined was split into one of 6 different fleets, denoted by different color flags: red, black, white, yellow, blue, and green. Which does make me think of that Sunday school song.
I was thinking of the Power Rangers, but either or.
Oh, the Power Rangers minus pink. I was thinking of that one like red, black, yellow, brown, and white. They are precious in His sight. Anyway, that's a glimpse into my childhood.
In the South.
Yes, in the Bible Belt. Cheng Yi and Cheng Yi Sao headed up the Red Fleet. And with Cheng Yi Sao doing the organizational legwork, they installed... They installed leaders for each different fleet who they felt would be loyal to them.
Pterodactyl!
Pterodactyl. Instead of a parrot on the shoulder, it's a little pterodactyl on the shoulder.
Saber-toothed tiger!
And this is an area where Cheng Yi Sao is given a lot of credit. She knew how to engender loyalty in people, either by making them like her or by making them indebted to her in some way. And then those are the people she put in power, knowing they'd be less likely to turn on her and Cheng Yi.
That's just a recipe for disaster, but yes.
She also put into place rules about who could give orders and how ships were assigned to fleets, and there were very real consequences for people going against those rules or trying to change from one fleet to another. In 2 years, they'd organized into a confederation with something like 400 junks and tens of thousands of pirates. The estimated numbers vary here based on where you're looking at your research, but it was probably anywhere between 50 and 70,000 pirates.
So this is like a town's worth of pirates.
Yeah, it's a huge number of people joined together into one big confederation. And with numbers like this, it's no surprise that they were having military victories over Guangdong province, taking out generals and ruling the waters and the coastal towns. And then, in 1807, Cheng Yi died. All my research describes this death as, quote, unexpected.
Most gunshot wounds are, Paula, I think.
Gunshot wounds? What are you implying here, Matthew?
My opinion would probably be that, for some reason, someone probably shot him. They are pirates.
Yeah, I have here, one has to wonder how unexpected death can be when you're a pirate. But I assume this mostly means, like, that he wasn't old?
Yeah, he probably wasn't old enough to die of old age.
At this point, Cheng Yi Sao is 32. She was born in 1775. And I don't think Cheng Yi was significantly older than her. I'm not 100% sure on that. I saw in a Wikipedia article that he was 42 when he died, but I didn't see that anywhere else. And it's Wikipedia, so that's probably semi-accurate. So Cheng Yi Sao and Cheng Yi had 2 children together.
That's the tagline for this show nowadays, by the way. I've been putting that in all the descriptions. Probably semi-accurate.
Probably semi-accurate.
Not wittingly lying.
We didn't know that was incorrect. Cheng Yi and Cheng Yi Sao had children together, an adopted son, who I'll talk about more in a moment, and 2 biological children. However old Cheng Yi was and however he died, in one place it was like he fell off the boat and he drowned. Who knows? Cheng Yi Sao is now a widow at a time in China where it seems that the expectation would be that she would retire into a life of quiet, chaste seclusion.
Sadness and longing for the rest of her life.
Just wear black for the rest of your life, the next 40 years, because your name is just that person's wife and that person is dead now. So
I've always said that my last words are going to be to my wife if I ever get married. I will say, never love again. Never be happy again without me. Bye, goodbye. I've been stabbed by a swordfish. What a surprise.
This was so unexpected.
This...
Wait, he has one last thing to say to you. Oh, quick, get those words out before you die. She leans her ear closer and closer to your mouth. Don't be happy without me.
I don't want you to ever see another penis.
She's like, all right, he said it. I have to only sleep with women from now on. Anyway, maybe this is just something that everyone says in their presentation of the story to contrast what Cheng Yi Sao actually goes on to do. I don't know how accurate it is that the expectation was like, all right, your own life is over. Go be quiet and celibate.
Go be sad on a mountain somewhere.
Cheng Yi Sao takes control of the pirate confederation. The other fleet leaders are still loyal to her. She's the one who assigned them to all their fleets in the first place, and she's worked hard on her diplomatic relationships with them. And she quickly assigns a new leader for the Red Fleet to replace Cheng Yi, someone who she knows will be able to lead the most powerful and largest fleet in the Confederation, someone who she knows will have the utmost loyalty to her. Their adopted son, Cheng Pao. So let's talk about Cheng Pao for a second. Cheng Pao was the son of a fisherman who had been captured by the pirates when he was 15. Cheng Yi decided he would be a good protege and took him under his wing, and also into his bed. Men sleeping with men was not uncommon on pirate ships, and I don't know if this was an ongoing thing or even how consensual it was. But regardless, Cheng Pao is adopted by the Chengs and given his own junk to command in the fleet.
So less of like an adopted son, more of like an adopted live-in husband.
Yeah, I think so. Someone who, like, I really think they adopted him less for a parent-child kind of relationship and more because they liked him and wanted him to have, like, the rights of an heir.
Yeah, the legality side of it. That makes a lot of sense.
I think, yeah. So he's straight up the perfect guy to put in charge of the Red Fleet after Cheng Yi's death. And to further solidify the loyalty, what do you think Cheng Yi Sao does?
Marries him.
Oh, yeah. She takes him as a lover. They eventually get married. So, yeah, she married her son. And apparently, like, everyone else in the fleet talked about this a lot. They were very concerned with it, according to. They were like, she married her son. That's kind of like incest. But he was adopted. And yeah, like we just said, I think it was more about inheritance rights than...
They weren't just swindling the Chinese people, Paula. They were just making a mockery of the legal systems in place. That's the worst thing they are going to do this whole time, I bet.
And traditional family values.
It's like they want to go to hell.
Cheng Yi Sao's leadership is in place, and her hold on the Confederation is intact. But she needs to make sure all the hundreds of junks and thousands of pirates know that cooperating under her leadership is what's best for them. So she put some rules in place. Now, it's hard to know exactly which of these rules were put in place while Cheng Yi was still alive and which Cheng Yi Sao did all on her own, or which rules Cheng Pao put into place once he was in charge of Red Fleet, but here's the basic rules. Orders could only be given by fleet commanders, and they got their orders from Cheng Yi Sao. Anyone caught giving orders who didn't have that specific authority was beheaded. If you took unauthorized shore leave, beheaded. All income would go into a communal fund for the entire Confederation. Anyone caught stealing from this fund would be...
disciplined with a large stick.
That took off their head.
Right off.
So the communal fund works like this. Whoever was responsible for bringing in the booty, to use a pirate term, got to keep 20% of it. But first, it would all be presented for inspection and then redistributed. Cheng Yi Sao knew that to keep a large organization like this running, they needed to all be taken care of equally. That means one fleet's loss or damage didn't totally destroy them. The rest of the fleets were there to get them back on their sea legs through this communal fund.
Oh, it's even worse than I thought, Paula.
The redistribution of wealth.
They're communists.
It was just like, we're all a company. You get a finder's fee, but we're all working for each other's good.
It's more like a company. It's like you can't just let one sector of the company run rampant with the money.
Yeah.
You can't have one factory spending all the money and there's no money for the rest of the factories,
Yeah.
right? So that makes sense.
Cheng Yi Sao also set up, I put this in quotes, working relationships with some of the coastal villages. 50,000 pirates needed a lot of supplies, and villages could pay for protection by providing those supplies to the Confederation. Anyone caught stealing from villages who were helping to supply the Confederation faced harsh punishments, like being beheaded. There were also rules set up on how to treat any female prisoners. Any sexual assault or rape would result, you guessed it, in being beheaded. They just beheaded a lot of people.
Which head?
Oh, maybe one and then the other,
That would be worse.
I think that's the harshest version of this punishment. Also, if you wanted to have a consensual relationship with one of these prisoners, you better not already be married, because infidelity would result in beheading. Which is kind of funny because some people think Cheng Yi Sao was already sleeping with Cheng Pao before she was a widow. But maybe, like we said before, there might have been a throuple situation going on. It's hard to know.
It's not a word I'm willing to say out loud, but yes, I see what you're saying.
It also seems like Cheng Yi Sao and Cheng Pao kept control of their fleets through the manipulation of religion. So, before any major outing or mission, the pirates would always pray and seek spiritual guidance. Should they undertake this? Would it be successful? And on one of the ships, Cheng Pao had an actual temple built. And the story goes that before these ceremonies, he would go to the priests and say, hey, this is what Cheng Yi Sao's plan is. This is what she wants the pirates to go do. And so then during the ceremonies, the priests would just be like, oh, yep, I heard it. I heard it from the power on high. That's what you should do. It's totally going to be successful. Cheng Yi Sao also knew she needed to make this piracy business function like, a business. Most of these pirates weren't in it because they wanted to be criminals. They were mostly poor farmers or other people who otherwise truly had no other options for providing for themselves or their families under the economic conditions of China at this time. So Cheng Yi Sao set up a way for them to do less stealing by instituting what I'm going to call a protection pass. She's basically organized crime, right? If your village or merchant ship paid the Confederation, they wouldn't attack you. At the height of the Confederation's power, there were essentially no ships moving through the waters of Guangdong province that didn't have one of these protection passes.
I mean, it's non-violent crime in some ways, but it's still the poor merchants who are suffering probably the most, because the Chinese government are going to be like, well, I don't care that you lost 10% of your money to piracy. Where's our 50%?
No.
Where's our 80%,
And that's actually not to say that the Confederation wasn't violent. They were pirates. They attacked foreign ships. They raided villages. There's one where they went up the Pearl River and one of the fleets and went into an area where they put up signs that were basically like, hey, you need to give us this, this, and this, or we're going to raid.
They're Vikings.
Yeah. Yeah. They took out government officials. They destroyed forts along the Pearl River. When the Chinese Navy tried to stop them, they were no match for the Confederation, who were destroying naval vessels faster than China could build them. They say that at this point, the admirals didn't even want to go out to sea at all. They were like, nah, we're just going to wait for favorable winds. So we're just going to stay on land for a little bit longer, though.
I would love, honestly, you make a great point. I would love to go out and deal with that, but can you feel that breeze? Because it is coming on like a storm.
It is unfavorable. When will it be favorable?
It is unseasonably unfavorable, unfortunately.
Government officials are also constantly being recalled from Guangdong province for failing to control or quell the pirates. The pirates' power was felt so strongly that China went to Western countries for help, which was a pretty drastic move for them. They negotiated with both Portugal and Britain for naval aid and ended up getting 6 Portuguese men of war to help them create a blockade that was meant to defeat the Confederation of Pirates once and for all.
Well, if you're going to ask 2 naval powers in the 1800s for help, it's the Portuguese and the British, right?
And they get some help from the Portuguese, and it was an intense battle, but the pirates won. They were basically able to break through the blockade and scoot by.
But they're just so drastically outnumbered. I mean, I know they're junks, but it's like if you got 600 rats and 6 cats, they might be professional rat killers, but there's a lot of rats.
That's a lot of rats. Now, that doesn't mean the fleet never took any losses. The White Flag Fleet in particular suffered a heavy defeat, and Cheng Yi Sao knew that this kind of success that she was having could only last for so long. It was time to negotiate a surrender with the Chinese government while they still had some power on their side.
That's a level head
Yeah.
of a decision to make, right?
I think she very much is a businesswoman.
So we need out of this because this ain't going to last forever. So
She's like, right now, I can see the weaknesses starting to come in.
she's cutting and running.
Yeah, like get out while you're on top, right? Don't wait for everything to start to fall apart and you don't have any negotiating leverage anymore.
Like, she doesn't have to die a pirate.
Yeah.
She could die a rich woman somewhere, go to Vietnam or something, you know?
So they start making negotiations, but they are totally deadlocked. Cheng Yi Sao wanted amnesty for all the pirates and to maintain...
That's a lot. That's a big ask.
It's a big ask.
All of them?
All of them. And she wanted to maintain a bunch of the junks for her and Cheng Pao because they had started being involved in the salt trade as part of their Confederation activities, and they wanted to be able to continue doing that.
No. If I'm the Chinese government, I'm saying no.
That is exactly what the government said.
And while you're here, those doors, they are locked. You're under arrest.
Well, that part they didn't say. But they were like, no. So Cheng Yi Sao was like, okay, thanks, bye. Because she had the leverage. She could threaten attack and plunder at any time. So she just like bounced and was like, yeah, okay, whatever. And after a few weeks, she gathered up a bunch of the other pirate wives and their children, and her fleet leaders were like, don't do this. This is dangerous. She was like, trust me, dudes. I know what I'm doing. So she takes all these wives and children with her. She goes back to the government offices, and she's like, hey, you ready to talk again? She basically was like, look, I have the same requests as before. Take it or leave it. But if you leave it, I'm going back to doing pirate stuff. And so the Chinese government just took it. And they gave in to everything she asked for. There was no compromise. They just said yes to all of it.
Fine, okay, you win. Well done. Stop it. Because in the long run, that is better for the Chinese government. It's a sign of massive weakness. But there's not like there's 20 other fleets who are then going to do the same thing. It was them and no one else.
This basically marks like a decline in Chinese piracy.
And so the Chinese government are cutting their losses. They're like, fine, we'll just give them everything they want. They go away. It's done.
We don't have to ask for help from the Portuguese anymore. We don't look like weak idiots who can't patrol our coast to any other foreign ships who come through.
Yeah, because you don't. That's a bad thing, right? Because the Portuguese could go one of two ways. They could say, yeah, we'll come and help you. You know, we can set up trade and stuff, and that'd be great. Or they can say, you know, the Chinese just told us that their navy sucks.
Should we like take advantage of that, or
should we maybe do something about? I mean, it's how far? 3 months away, you say. Well, we can get there.
Cheng Yi Sao gets to hold on to a bunch of ships. Her pirates all get amnesty, and many of them get placed in government positions.
Well, she's so lucky she stopped when she did, because we're talking 50 years and we're talking steamships are coming. You know, these are junks, and then you've got, these are sail ships. The Opium Wars are coming, and that's a naval war, and spoiler alert, the British dominate the Chinese. And a few hundred junk pirate ships ain't gonna have made any difference to that. They would have just gone under.
Cheng Pao is also able to become a high-ranking military official.
Good for him.
Yeah, he ends up like leading a whole situation. She gets like a new title added to her name because of it. Like, it's a whole thing. She's really like created the careers of tons of people.
She basically created a military, then had that military disbanded, but integrated them all into the real military. Yeah. Which is a great opportunity that a lot of these men probably wouldn't have had otherwise. So you've got to see that.
Yeah, 100%. So remember, most of these were poor farmers who were just like, well, I got to make money somehow. I guess I'll become a pirate for a little while.
That doesn't take away from the fact that she's a brutal, murderous villain. Let's be real.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just like, they were like, if you break my rules, I kill you. Done. Cheng Yi Sao ended up not only one of the most successful pirates in history, but also a successful, legitimate businesswoman after, with a high-ranking husband. She died at the age of 69, having started as a poor commoner, working in a brothel, to becoming a pirate's wife, to becoming a pirate leader who'd earned the respect and loyalty of thousands of men. I will say quickly here that I researched a lot of different places, but a lot of my research, my main resources, came from works done by Dian Murray. And I just wanted to acknowledge that here, because without those pieces, I wouldn't have had nearly the historical detail I was able to find about Cheng Yi Sao. One last random thing that I loved, I just have to say, it didn't fit anywhere else, but I just want to say that some of the official Chinese records don't refer to them as pirates, but as sea rebels.
Sea rebels is pretty good.
And I just really like that. A sea rebel. These sea rebels.
Well, that's the way the Chinese would have, because there were lots of rebellions. China, that was a big problem in China. And so thinking of them as sea rebels just makes sense. Probably just the translation is how we get it, right? It's like, well, they're rebels of this, that makes sense.
Yeah.
If you want to rebel in a strange and bewildering way that changes the course of maybe our lives.
That's right.
You can hit the button below this video and just subscribe. We'd love it if you could subscribe. It's the best way to stay up to date on what we're doing. And honestly, growing the podcast, subscribing, all the things that we know we need to do, they really do help. That's why people ask you to do them. So, along with telling a friend about the show who you think might enjoy the show, subscribing really helps us out. Thank you, Paula, so much for doing the research on this one.
You're
It's a story that
welcome.
I kind of knew about but didn't really know about, and it was absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, she's badass.
We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.